You may be seated. Good afternoon, and thank you for coming to support Bryson Cowan in his oral today. I'm Leah McQueen. On the panel with me is Mr. Nelson and Mrs. Gladson, and we're going to start off with a prayer. Dear God, I pray that you'll be with Bryson today as he shares his message. I pray that we will listen and that we will learn. I pray that you will give him clarity of thought and help him to think on his feet, and help us to just have a good conversation about his ideas when he's finished speaking. We thank you for him, and we thank you for this day, and we thank you for MCA. In Jesus' name, amen.
Since the beginning of time, mankind has sought to develop a society of peace where everyone lives in harmony. We have tried combining the church with the state, following Marxism, worshiping gods, and being a nation of the people, for the people. Yet none of these systems have worked. But it's not necessarily the system in place that have failed us, but rather it is our fault. We are unable to agree on every aspect of life. These disagreements can lead to broken relationships and, in extreme cases, hatred for those who oppose you, especially when our most sacred beliefs are challenged. Sides are taken on family structure, abortion, climate change, immigration, and many more. I'm sure you can see this in your life, and if you are like me, see this divide each day. This led me to ask the question, where has the divide in our society's morality come from? To answer this, we will investigate it from a religious and psychological standpoint. But first, let us begin with the definition for the word morality. The Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines it as a doctrine or system of moral conduct and conformity to ideals of human conduct. But Jonathan Haidt, a psychologist specializing in human ethics, offers a deeper explanation. He defines morality as follows. Moral systems are interlocking sets of values, virtues, norms, practices, identities, institutions, technologies, and evolved psychological mechanisms that work together to suppress or regulate self-interest, and they make cooperative societies possible. Your moral system is involved in every aspect of life. It is shaped by your upbringing, your religion, and the people you admire. Now, there are two types of morality, descriptive and normative. Descriptive is what people believe to be moral, and normative is the true distinction between right and wrong. When discussing the psychological reasons, I will utilize the descriptive, and when talking about religion, utilize the normative. Now that we have defined morality, let us look at one of the most familiar moral divides we are faced with, the divide between conservative and liberals. Here is generally what is meant when referring to these groups. Conservatives tend to want less government interference in American lives. They want to stick to traditional, social, and political ideals. Liberals, on the other hand, want more regulation from the government, favor social change, and support individualization. I realize analyzing these two groups is a generalization of people's morals, but the goal is to not put people in this either-or category, but rather it is to develop a sense for why people have the moral systems they do. If we can find the reasons for the divide in these larger groups, we can also do it in our smaller divides in our moral systems. Jonathan Haidt, the author of The Righteous Mind, identifies 5 psychological foundations that form someone's moral makeup, so to speak. Each foundation raises an emotion in us that gives us our perception of what is right or wrong. The stronger the emotional response, the more a moral foundation will affect your morals. The first foundation is the fairness and cheating, which focuses on doing your part, and it is based on the principle of cooperation and whether people deserve the outcome they receive. You may feel an injustice when someone is given something they have not earned, and vice versa. Both liberals and conservatives care about fairness, but in different ways. Take this, for example. Liberals have been advocates of spending tax money to provide reparations to some minority groups in the U.S. They believe these minorities have been cheated out of a fair chance in our economy, and it is only fair that we help them out. On the flip side, some conservatives think that taking money from the people and redistributing it is unfair to them. They believe these minorities have had the same chance in our economy as everyone else, and they would just be taking money from themselves. Conservatives feel cheated out of their money, and liberals believe minorities were cheated out of a fair chance. But both of them care about fairness, but just in different ways. The next foundation is the loyalty and betrayal. When you have formed a relationship with a group, person, or idea, it comes with some level of loyalty. The stronger they are, the harder they become to break. We find people with similar moral systems and develop loyalty with them. Conservatives and liberals seem to both have gone overboard with loyalty. Aristotle warns us about the excess of virtue and says that there instead must be a golden mean. An excess of loyalty can create an obsession. Do not allow yourself to become obsessed with an idea in person and let it cloud your moral thinking. Be loyal, but not at the expense of truth. It seems today debates and politics do not always aim at the truth, but rather at winning the other person to their side. The third foundation is the authority and subversion. This one is triggered by someone's perception of authority and power structures. Power structures can be found in our family, at your job, in our government, and even in our age differences. You will listen to someone in an authority position if you believe them to be a decent person and of higher authority. Conservatives tend to subvert to a religion and more traditional ideals for their authority. Liberals seem to be more random in choosing their authorities, even if they choose one at all. They begin to rely more on their emotions and thoughts, creating themselves to be their own authority. This may be why they are more accepting of another person's way of life, even if it seems untraditional or crazy. Next is the sanctity and degradation foundation, which is closely tied to the human body and symbols. This foundation goes beyond physical harm and focuses on the harm that can be done to your mind and your soul. If you are a Christian and you see a Bible being burned, it disgusts and rightfully angers you. If you see a swastika, you are disgusted and saddened because you know what it stands for. Conservatives tend to value objects and symbols that have tradition and cannot stand them being defaced or ridiculed. Liberals still view certain acts as degrading, but they may be open to, say, the changing of someone's sex more than a conservative would be. The last foundation is the care and harm. This foundation is anchored in your emotional response to suffering. Our natural response to suffering is to try to end the suffering. This causes the divide in one of the more known issues between the conservatives and liberals. Liberals will often advocate for groups like the LGBTQ community because they believe they are suffering. Liberals do not want to see someone be punished or harmed for living the life they want to live. Conservatives, on the other hand, view the LGBTQ ideals as harmful not only to themselves, but also to the conservatives' view on gender and marriage. They both spot the harm and suffering, but they just react on it different ways. All these foundations can give us insight into how a person develops their moral thinking. They allow us to see where people come from and help us realize that we too are experiencing the same emotions. We may act on them differently or react strongly to different things. Although these foundations are practically helpful, they aren't at the heart of our division. For that, I think we need to turn to religion. Humans have always sought out a higher power or moral law that is transcendent of their own. Some have followed the Greek and Egyptian gods, others have followed Allah, or what they think is best. If you become your own authority, your morals are much more likely to be swayed by your circumstances and your emotions. If your authority is a supernatural being of some sort, your moral thinking stems directly from them or your religion's text or scripture. In my personal life, the Christian God is my authority, and I believe provides the reasons for why we are separated morally, not just in our descriptive, but also in our normative. The Christian faith is based around an omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent God. He is the standard for what is good, and He is unchanging. When He created us, we were made in His likeness. We were supposed to be a reflection of His perfect moral nature. But our sin got in the way of that. Our choice to rebel against God separated us from our true morality. And once separated from God, we also became separated from each other. So where does this leave us? How do we navigate a world where there are constant competing moral systems? As previously described, we can use the moral foundations to understand how people have arrived at their viewpoints. But here are some further suggestions. First, we must learn to control our emotions. In the Screw Tape Letter, C.S. Lewis writes from the perspective of a demon who wants to steer humans toward evil. The demon does this by trying to cloud human thinking with emotion. When we let anger or frustration lead the way in our conversations, we can stop seeing people as people. We fail to separate the idea from the person and reduce them to only the beliefs they hold. Another suggestion is to stop viewing other sides as the most extreme versions of who they claim to side with. If I tell a conservative to picture a liberal, some may envision one who is completely for the killing of children in the womb, gay pride, and indoctrinating our kids with their same beliefs. This is what I would go to when thinking about a liberal. However, this is extremely unhealthy and causes us to view the person once again only through the lenses of their beliefs. People's moral systems are much more nuanced and require understanding. Do not assume the worst of a person just because they hold one belief that may be different from yours. Along those same lines, do not view other people's moral systems as completely wrong. Different moral systems can contain healthy ways of thinking. Finally, we need to be able to form relationships with people who may have opposing moral systems. If you do not form a bond with them first, you'll have consistent problems creating productive moral conversations. Forming these relationships humanizes them, so you no longer view them as opposition, but as someone with true value. To do this, try to focus on what you may have in common with a person, rather than what differences you have. And when you do eventually come across a topic you disagree on, listen first. Allow them to explain their beliefs, and you can ask questions like, where have your beliefs come from? What life experiences have influenced your views on these topics? Do you have questions for someone who disagrees with you? Do you have any doubts about your view? These questions will lead to better conversations and show that you are interested in what the other person has to offer. Now, there is something that may hinder our ability to act this out well. When I was interviewing Dr. Moore, an evangelical theologian and ethicist, I asked him what he thought divided our society's morality. Dr. Moore responded by saying that he thinks one of the main factors is social media. He believes it enhances our tribal behavior and grounds us more in our beliefs that we already have. In an article written by Reputation Sciences, they back up Dr. Moore's claim, saying, filter bubbles isolate users by showcasing content aligning with their beliefs, while echo chambers amplify similar viewpoints, distorting broader perspectives. This can lead to societal divisions and reduce critical thinking. Social media, though not a root cause of our division, does polarize us more in the beliefs we already have. So next time you are scrolling, you may be watching something you want to see instead of something you need to see. So why should we care about our division? It seems we may never be able to erase this moral divide, so why should we even try? Though we cannot erase the divide completely, we can use the moral foundations and method mentioned to steer our society towards the truth. And that goal should be worthy of our effort, especially as Christians, because we are called to do just that by God. God calls us to share His word and make disciples of the world. We are called to bring people back to our moral standard in God. So next time you are faced with an uncomfortable conversation, remember to stay calm, ask questions, and remember you are talking to a person, not just a belief. Thank you.
Great job.
Thank you.
So I want to know, is there something in your personal experience that made this topic important to you?
Not really anything that's happened yet. I just think going off to college, we may be experiencing a lot more new ideas that we aren't familiar with, and just being prepared for that is a good thing.
Do you feel like you spend a lot of time around people who think very differently from you right now?
Not right now. I can't really think of anyone. Everyone at the school kind of holds the same, foundations I do. But yeah. And
when you go, well, tell us about your plans.
Okay, I'm going to Texas A&M and pursuing a business degree.
Okay, and so when you go off to A&M, do you think that you will have to develop relationships with people who are different from you?
You don't have to. I do think, from a biblical perspective, you should. Because if they don't have the same belief as, maybe they don't believe in God, you don't have to jump on them for their beliefs, but it will be nice to build a healthy relationship with them so you can eventually maybe show them the truth in God. So.
Okay, I think that's great because, the reality is it's a big enough place. You can go and you can find this and not have any more diversity in your life than you do right now. Mm-hmm. But I encourage everybody that has that opportunity to do that, because without relationships with those kind of people, then how do we influence for good and for God? Have you thought of any ways or things you could do to foster that?
Relationships with other people? Mm-hmm. I don't think you have to force it necessarily. I think there might be some opportunities that come by either by God's will or just in your everyday life. And I think if that opportunity arises, you can, use some of the methods. If they say something like, they don't believe in God or something, you can just be like, oh, you want to tell me more? Or you can use it for God's purpose.
Okay, great. All right, I'm moving on. You talk about that in order for people to be at peace, that we need to be in agreement. Tell me why that is, or if that's what you meant.
Yeah, I don't think we should strive to be at peace for the sake of peace, because that could mean we all agree on some, not godly intentions. I think we should strive for the peace in God and peace and unity in Him. Would be the main goal. I don't think it'll ever happen, but that's what we should be aiming towards.
Okay, and do we have to agree exactly on everything in order for that peace to exist?
I don't think so. I think your foundation needs to be the same of the moral standard in God. But, some people are going to care about different things than you care about, but they can still be good things to care about. And everyone can't care about the same things, because then other things wouldn't be cared for. So if someone cares more about the environment than you do, but you care more about, like foster children, both are great methods to glorify God, but you're not going to have everyone care for each thing.
Yeah, and it feels like that's kind of necessary, because can one person really care enough about everything to do anything about it? In fact, I think that came up in somebody's oral yesterday. But yeah, so that's good. I feel like, if we took a poll here on any certain issue, church-related or school-related, we probably wouldn't all agree. But yet, I think you can still have unity on the bigger picture in spite of that. So do you think people are intentional about their morality, or is it something that just happens to them?
I think it can be both. I think the way you grow up can have a big impact. If you grow up in like the city, or what school you go to and things like that, single parent, both parents, it definitely has an effect. At some point, people do choose what they believe, though, and they can choose to pursue if they want to know what they believe is correct, or if there's other beliefs out there. They have the choice to pursue those. But I think some are naturally, and the only way to get them out of there, like if you've developed beliefs, you have to actively pursue the truth and like learning, is your belief correct, or is there something else out there?
So when it comes to that point where it's your choice, do people think intentionally about that, or do you think they just go with what has formed in them?
I think they tend to go with what is formed in them. And so, like, from my perspective as a Christian, it'd be my job to let them know that there are different ways, and that you don't have to continue in this way. And then if they still think it's right, then they will continue in that way. Yeah,
I think we're kind of an exception. I think at least we try to force y'all to think about it. I don't know if that always works. But I think most people in the world don't really have this moment in life where they go, oh, this is my moral foundation. This is my moral system, and I've intentionally thought through this. And so one of the things that we can do to help people do that is to ask the questions that you've talked about asking. Now, I'm kind of throwing this at you, and I feel a little bad, but I just thought of it. Do you remember the whole elephant and rider thing from the book?
I think so.
Can you
explain it?
Yeah.
So I think it was...
This is what happens when your tutor has also read your book that you read for your thesis.
I know it was something with emotion controlling reason. I think it was the elephant. The elephant is reason and the rider is emotion, or is it the other way?
I don't know if it's quite that clear cut. So the elephant is your life, and you're the rider directing it.
Okay.
But who does he say really is directing it?
Your emotions.
Yeah, the elephant. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what happens is the elephant will do something, and then the rider will justify the elephant having done that. And that's how most people go through life. And so I think it supports that idea that we don't intentionally think through all of our actions, even as Christians with a good moral foundation. All right, I'm going to pass it on.
Great job, Bryson. So I'm gonna jump right into this. So in World History 2 and in Great Books 4 last year, you read a little bit of Nietzsche, and one of the things that you read by Nietzsche is Parable of the Madman, right? So in the Parable of the Madman, it starts off by the madman running around into the busy streets, waving around a lantern, right? And it's lit, it's broad daylight, and so it doesn't really make a lot of sense for why this is happening. And at one point, as he's, frantically yelling to the people, he says, "We have unchained ourselves from an object." Okay, what was the object he says that we've unchained ourselves from?
It was from God.
Okay.
He says it was the sun.
Okay, yeah, right. So he says we've unchained ourselves from the sun. Okay, and so how does that relate to your thesis?
Yeah, I think Nietzsche was a big advocate of people can create their own moral ways, and so the parable goes on about that we've killed God and unchained ourselves from Him. And so I think when you unchain yourself, well, he said the sun, and so everything would go into chaos if the earth was unchained from the sun. So I think without God, it's just chaotic moral systems, kind of. People don't have a path or an overarching idea of what they believe.
Mm-hmm. So why would that, so unchaining ourselves from God as this moral authority, why would that lead to this chaos for people's different moral systems? Why would people be unable to agree?
They would eventually just put themselves as their own authority, and they wouldn't have anything to base it off of, which still happens today, except I think everyone, deep down eventually knows that there's right and wrong, and I think that's because God is there. So it just goes into chaos, because if everyone is their own authority, then there is no authority.
Yeah, and that's exactly, Nietzsche's solution in the Parable of the Madman is the madman is telling everybody else, get your own lanterns and light those lanterns. In essence, you get to become your own authority for morality. You get to become your own authority for truth. Mm-hmm. And so, what do you think the natural conclusion of that is? If everybody gets to be their own mini God and run around as their own source of authority?
What would it lead to?
Yeah.
Nothing good. It would lead. If everyone is defining what is right and wrong, you couldn't even say those words, really. You couldn't even say right and wrong. It would just delve into chaos, mm-hmm. and probably end the human race.
Okay, yeah. So it descends into chaos and anarchy, and then, when you look at it, when chaos ensues, a tyrant rises up. And so then, regarding authority, what is it? Who's dictating the new form of morality?
I think whoever asserts himself as the most powerful,
yeah.
or most persuasive.
Yeah, and so it's interesting because when you look at an issue like morality, at the end of the day, to me, it always seems to come back to morality or to authority, right? Who is going to be the authority? Okay, if I look at God as the final authority for morality, then I have this objective standard that I can base my moral decisions off of. But if it's just myself, or it's just whoever is the strongest, like Nietzsche would argue, then at the end of the day, morality is only the subjective thing that depends on who has the most power to dictate it, which is a scary thing.
Yeah.
And I think frequently when you look through the Bible, that happens time and time again, especially if you read the book of Judges. The people of Israel in the book of Judges are constantly running into this problem again, where they leave God and become their own, source of morality. And I was thinking about a passage from Psalms. And so Psalm 11:3 asks, "If the foundations are destroyed, what can the righteous do?" And so regarding morality, if man is destroying the foundations for morality, what are we as believers to do?
I mean, I think God has called us, and He said it's going to be hard. We're going to be persecuted in this life. I think there will be times where they attack our foundations, and there is now, and it has always been. So I think as believers, we just need to trust in Him and the Word, and trust what He says. And if we do believe it to be, the moral foundation, and have that faith in Him, I think either, we may be persecuted on this earth, but we can still have the vision of heaven.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Another kind of switching gears a little bit, but still in the same train of thought. How have you developed your personal sense of morality?
I mean, I think I was always born into like a Christian household, so that definitely had some influence. And other than that, I think just like watching people who I look up to, the people I've been pouring into my life, alter it as well. I think at this point, like if I am to be strong in my moral foundation, I just have to keep pursuing Christ and reading His Word.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned at the beginning of your answer being born into a Christian household. Can I get you to read something for me real quick?
Sure.
So this is Deuteronomy chapter 6. Read verses 4 through 9. So it starts right up here.
Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord with your God, with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. And these words which I command you today shall be in your heart.
4 through 9.
Oh, sorry. 6 looks like a 9 if you just... You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk to them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates.
All right. So, in that passage, who is the speaker speaking to?
He's talking to Israel.
To Israel, and then specifically to what members of Israel? What generation?
The parents.
The parents, right? So how significant of a role do parents play in the development of their children's morality?
I think it's really significant. I mean, they're going to be there from when you're obviously born until probably you're 18 and maybe even longer. So whatever values they instill in you, that's definitely what you're going to trust the most when you go out into the world, is what your parents have taught you. And if they haven't taught you well, you may be grounded in something you shouldn't be.
Yeah, because you're going to get a sense of morality from somewhere, right? Well, even if it's not from your parents, you're going to get it from other people in your life. You're going to get it from, TV, television shows, social media, and so there's always going to be something that is going to fill in that gap if parents aren't taking their role seriously. And so what's the danger of parents outsourcing their moral influence?
The dangers is, for one, the parents don't know what their kids are being taught. I do think there could be instances where it could be healthy. But for the majority, I think parents play a really crucial role in your life. And so if they are a healthy influence, they should know what's going on in your life and not just ship you off for someone else to put their impression on them. I think it should be the impression of the parents first.
What are ways that you can think of that parents may unintentionally outsource that influence?
I mean, school is a big one, just because that's where you're going to be probably 8 hours a day. And it's outsourced. I don't think people shouldn't go to school, obviously. I just think they need to be aware of what they're being taught in school. I think it could be pretty scary if people indoctrinate them and the parents aren't aware of it.
Awesome. Thanks, Bryson.
Yep.
Hey, Bryson. Great job. Okay. I'm going to get you to think back for a second to World History 2. And probably before that, too. What are some examples in history that you can think of where societies were either not based on proper moral foundations, or those foundations were shifted or changed, or maybe never even set in the first place? And like, what were the negative outcomes of that?
I mean, the first couple that come to mind are obviously like Germany in 1940 and then Russia as well, because their morals were grounded more in one person, and when that one person is fallen, so are your foundations. I don't really think any system throughout the world has ever had a perfect foundation for a government. It's just not really possible. Government is pretty complex and run by people, so I don't think it'll ever work.
I agree. I think that's very true. So thinking about, Germany and Russia as an example, do you see any similarities in the values that those cultures had at the time and what we are kind of turning to as Americans today?
Like, is America going towards what they are?
Yeah.
For like Germany, the government was like a person. I think we're kind of getting to that where we put all our faith in like who's the next president and who's the next, congressman and stuff like that. If we're just putting the faith in the person and not like what their beliefs are, I think that can be dangerous.
Can you explain why that's dangerous?
Because people are fallen just like everyone else, and so they're not going to know the differences between what is good and right unless their foundation is based in God.
Yeah, very good. So kind of with all that being said, do you think that our trajectory as a nation is kind of headed that same way?
It's hard to tell. I think if we're not careful, it could be. I think, today we think, American government is way worse than it was like 100 years ago. I think 100 years ago it was probably experiencing the same things. We just didn't really know about it through like the media. But the only way to guard against that is to make sure like who we are putting in power doesn't take the power as their responsibility, but gives it up to God.
Yeah, that's really good. Okay, I'm going to switch gears a little bit. So I think you presented the gospel in a really fantastic way toward the end of your speech. But earlier, and like clearly throughout this conversation and in your speech, you mentioned that a lot of your moral values come from Christianity. Earlier, though, in your paper, you talk about Aristotle's warning of the danger of committing too fully to something. Mm-hmm. Do you think that applies to Christianity?
I don't think so. I think loyalty, if you put something that just becomes like your life, or that's going to sound bad. Loyalty is a good thing as long as you're loyal to the right thing. So I think truth is first, and then you need to be loyal to the truth. And I think Christianity, from all of my learning, I think it is the truth, and I think it is what I should put my faith in. So that's what I'd say.
So how does that? Is there a distinction between that and other religions? If those other religions kind of produce good moral character?
Yeah, I think there are aspects of different religions that do kind of align with Christianity that are good thoughts. I think you can still have those. I think you should be loyal to what if you've hold those beliefs all your life, but don't let it cause you to ignore other beliefs and like allow yourself to just be stuck. Like allow yourself to investigate, is this the truth? Who should I ask if it's not? And things like that.
Do you have some practical ways that you've gone about that, or advice for those who are kind of seeking that?
I guess practical ways is apologetics this year. If we had like any questions, you could always ask Mr. Custer because he knows probably all the answers. And so if you have any doubts, like just try to clear the doubts up. Don't hold your doubts in and let them like destroy what you've believed all your life. Just try to see if you can reconcile them with the Bible or what you believe. For other people, like I think an important question is like, do you have any doubts about your beliefs? It's like what I mentioned. And if they do, I think that's a good opening. If they're kind of stuck and they don't think they're wrong, it could be a lot harder. I don't know. I feel like there has to be doubt before they start trying to get out of it.
Okay. So, kind of our last train of thought. I really like how you kind of present, that there may be differences in how we apply some moralities, but that doesn't necessarily mean that someone is devoid of moral character just because they disagree with how you want to enact it. Mm-hmm. Are there any issues or anything that you see kind of in today's culture that you think does signal kind of complete moral depravity? And if so, how do we kind of distinguish between those two things?
A couple things that come to mind is like, I think abortion is pretty devoid of any moral standard. Especially in most cases, at least. Now, there are a select few where people will argue like they're caring for the person as well. I just don't think most of them are. And then, what was the other part of that question?
Oh, that's okay. So how do you, I guess, why is abortion to you kind of devoid of moral fiber, and how do you determine that?
I think they've just devalued human life like to a complete. Like they just don't value it at all. And I think when you start devaluing life, then you're pretty lost.
Really good. Thank you.
I want to follow up on that just a little bit. I completely agree with you on the abortion issue. But do people who think it's okay see it as not valuing life? Or are they just valuing a different life?
Yeah, I think they're valuing the person or the woman who is carrying the baby. I just don't think the thing is like the woman usually isn't at risk of dying. I think abortion is killing of the child. Now there's like, I think it's like 5% of the cases are like maybe life or death. That's different. But for like the others, I think they're putting the person's inconvenience over a life, and that's not okay.
Yeah, and the reason I wanted to ask that is because the whole premise of your paper is that I should be able to sit down with somebody who disagrees with me on that issue and have an unemotional, logical, good conversation. But I think so many Christians approach it as like, you're wrong, you don't care, I'm done with you. And when we approach it like that, what's the likelihood of us drawing them to Jesus?
Not very likely.
Yeah. And so I think we have to start at this place of admitting that they do care about something. Mm-hmm. It's just different than what I care about.
Right.
Which kind of leads me into my next thing. One of my favorite things that you say in your paper is that we need to stop viewing others as the most extreme version of who they claim to side with. And then along that same line, you talk about some hot button issues. So how do I do that practically? How do I treat someone not as the most extreme version that I see in my head? And how do I approach this hot button issue? I don't want to be open-minded necessarily, but maybe with some compassion.
Right. I think first you need to realize that they're not you. So everything you've gone through, they did not. So how you were raised, what life advice you were given, they may have been completely on their own in these circumstances. You don't really need to, again, like force your beliefs on them. I think if you can just get them talking about why they believe it, sometimes that can even cause them to be like, well, what am I saying with this? And so I think listening is really good. And like, Yeah, I think, is that...
Yeah, and back to our previous point, they may not have really thought about it that much. And so I think that asking good questions opens the door for that. I think a similar, it kind of goes back to what we were talking before. A similar thing is like, you also talk about, I don't know that you explicitly say this, but I think you say it, that like we approach all of these things as issues and we don't see the person. So is there a way I can overcome that also?
Yeah, I think it's easier for Christians. I don't know if we act it out as well as we should, but I think it should be easier for us because we already know that they have value besides their beliefs.
What? If they disagree with me, they have value?
Yeah.
Oh.
I know.
Okay.
But if you're not like a Christian and it's just like two people who don't believe in God, it can be a little harder. But I think generally people can get past beliefs as long as it's not going at each other. Like, you're wrong. I can't believe you think this. Is both people just come together and be like, let's just talk about this and like both of our sides instead of trying to argue about it.
Yeah. I think you've said two really good things. If I had been born where that person was born and raised by the people that they were raised by, would I be any different than them?
Yeah.
So I think it's really useful to put ourselves in that position. And then another thing that I think is good that you've alluded to is, how can I make that issue personal? If I don't know anybody that it's a personal issue for, can I read a story? Can I? And again, I do think that takes some discernment, because you only want to be open-minded about the things that you are well grounded in. But I think it helps when it becomes a little more personal and I'm not just treating it like an issue. All right, I'm going to go on to my last thing. Do you think social media has turned us all into rivals?
I think to a degree it has. And by social media, I don't think I just mean like Instagram or Twitter, stuff like that. But I think media as a whole. I think Mr. McDuffie, like in economy, he'll tell us that he sees like two different things reporting on like an event. And even the title is just completely different to for each side, I guess, for like a conservative or liberal. And so I think it's not a bad thing, but people do just put their own opinions into it, and it's not objective.
And can that happen even within like Christianity? Is it turning Christians into rivals?
Within Christianity, or like Christian and non-Christian?
No, within Christianity.
I think it can. I don't see it as much. Like if I'm on any social media, there are different, obviously, like religious beliefs within Christianity, and I think those can be overblown in it. Like, if you don't believe this, then are you really even a Christian? It's like, probably. Like, if you believe in God, then and Jesus Christ and what He did for you, you are.
Yeah. So a couple of people in their orals have already brought up this idea of comparison. If comparison is going on, have I created a rival between me and that person? A rivalry?
I think so.
Yeah, so it might just be that I'm looking at their new outfit going, oh, they're dressed better than me. This conversation has never happened in my head, by the way, because I don't care. But maybe with other things. And so you've created a rivalry. And then that's on a small scale. And then on this huge scale, we've created this rivalry amongst all these different groups. I can't take credit for that question. I got that from a podcast I was listening to. But, I mean, they made the point that, you know, I used to maybe be envious of my classmates or my neighbors or the people that I was right around. But now I can be envious of the whole world.
That's true.
And so it's created rivalries in all of these different places. So I could talk a lot more about the social media thing. I have a lot more questions about it, but it appears to be your turn to ask us questions.
Okay, the question for all of you is there a time in your life you were faced with an uncomfortable conversation and it either led to like a good, healthy thing with like Christ, or if it was just too rough and you had to break the relationship off?
Someone's ready.
Okay, mine is very personal, so I won't get into too many details, but I have a good friend who I'm still very good friends with, and I was roommates with in college, and we were a part of Christian community together, and we kind of believed all the same things, and since post-college, she's kind of split off and, renounced the faith, and kind of her politics have all gone differently than mine. And so I visited her last summer, and she's a very direct person, and so we just had a very open conversation about all of it. And she asked me point blank, why are you still a part of the church, that's hurt so many people, all these things. And it ended up being really cool because I got to present the gospel to her in a way that she had never heard before, even growing up in the church. And so I am not a confrontational person, and because it was only because I love her so much that I was willing to engage in that conversation. But it really taught me a lot about just being willing to be open and approach these uncomfortable topics that you talk about in your paper. And sometimes, it can lead to more love between you rather than increase animosity. So,
Nice.
So I have 3 older brothers. And one of them, who is 9 years older than me and him oftentimes haven't gotten along for much of life. And there was a long period of time when we would have family get-togethers, and me and him believe very differently on a lot of different issues, especially social issues. And so for a long time, whenever we'd have the family get-togethers, the family gatherings, me and him inevitably at different points would go at it, arguing about different things. And there was a certain point in my life where I think maybe God helped me have this realization, but I realized it's not my responsibility to change my brother's mind. And I think, our different beliefs and differences on a lot of these topics were damaging to our relationship, because I wasn't really seeing my brother as my brother, as I should be. And so I realized that, I want to love my brother, and I want to be able to enjoy talking with him and enjoy having conversations with him. And so for me, it was one of those things where I realized that on my part, there was more wisdom in me just remaining silent. Understanding I wasn't going to change his mind on things, and that's okay. And so if I valued my relationship with him, he knows what I believe. I know what he believes on things. And on some of the things, the things we would argue about at a certain level don't matter. And so for me, it was a realization that I need to just hold my tongue on a number of things and be able to actually enjoy my relationship with my brother. And I'd say since that realization, we've gotten along a lot better. And we do have lots of things that we both share that we enjoy, and our relationship is a lot better when we can focus on talking about those things.
Thank you.
I'm going to give this very general, vague answer that's going to repeat a lot of what Mr. Nelson said. I often think back to the fact that God did not force his morality on us. He gives us a choice. So who would I be to try to force mine on someone? Do I want to influence? Do I want to encourage? Do I want people to accept Jesus and his moral foundation? Absolutely, because I know it's the best, most fun, adventurous way to live life. But I can't force them. And so I think kind of along the same lines of what Mr. Nelson has said, that I think we get so focused on our differences and what we disagree about, and we argue and we fight about it, when in some settings it's just better if we focus on what we both love and what we both enjoy. And so it's something that I'm still learning to do, but that I have learned to do. Because ultimately, the people I'm closest to know what I think about most everything. And that doesn't mean I might not still try to encourage them in some way, but I don't have to continue to tell them how I feel or what I think. All right.
Thank you.
All right, I'll pray to close us, and then we'll be done. God, I thank you so much for this opportunity to just come together and discuss Bryson's thesis. I thank you for his willingness to jump into hard topics and address them head on, so that we can leave here just better equipped and with a better understanding of you ultimately and what you want for us. I pray that you just bless Bryson going forward in the rest of this year and the next, and in the next phase of life. We love you so much. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you.